You are at the Creating Hope Through Inspiring Practical and High Impact Sustainability Plans workshop. And I'm delighted to be coming to you from the traditional territory I did the kilometer measure. I'm about 4,600 kilometers from Vancouver, way across Turtle Island, on the traditional territory of the St. Lawrence, Iroquois, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And I am just beginning to really learn and understand more about this traditional territory and the folks that came before us. But I am very grateful for all of their stewardship. And I'm actually being introduced to somebody from the Mohawk Nation in a couple of weeks, and hope to learn more about some of the work we're doing out here and how they can help inform us and for us to forge a partnership. So that's sort of some of the personal steps that I'm taking. And I also, just on the topic of territorial learning and Indigenous wisdom, I just finished again reading Braiding Sweetgrass, which I would highly recommend to folks. Maybe some of you have read it. I see some heads nodding. I actually listened to it as well, and she is just the most lovely storyteller. She's anyway, and she does her own audio. So welcome to this conversation. You saw my bio. These are the bullet points, but essentially I'm involved in a number of different green-ish, very green, actually deep green initiatives. And up until COVID started, I was leading for a couple of years the Case Green Schools project. And that is on pause, and I don't have new information about when, if, how that might come back. But I do bring all the learning and the colleagueship and what we figured out as we were working through those 2 years. So I hope to bring some of that research and information to this and talk really about inspiring folks to really stretch, because that is what we all need to do, is stretch. So my plan for today is to cover these 5 points. So I want to talk a little bit about hope and inspiration first, and then I will talk a bit about how I see practical and high impact as how I define those in the context of sustainability plans. And I want to bring just a couple of thoughts about climate and the climate crisis as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and those sort of parallel crises in many cases that we're facing. And then I want to talk about student voices, and they're in my head, and they're probably in your head even more so throughout, but I want to just hear from you and talk a bit about what our students are asking of us. And then open, a conversation about what your schools can be doing together in partnership and in collaboration to really help move us forward on this climate crisis. So that's my plan. Please, so Gareth Jones is here, and have I got your last name right there, Gareth?
Yep.
Yeah. So he's going to co-host with me and moderate the chat a little bit, see if there are questions or technical issues. He's going to create the breakout groups, and we'll have a couple of those. And just generally troubleshoot for me. So I'm very grateful for your help, Gareth. And before I actually got anywhere into this, what I actually wanted to do was to have our first breakout session. You've all just sat through Dr. Watson's presentation, as did I, and you haven't maybe had a chance to talk to anybody about it yet. So I thought I'd just give you a moment or two in a breakout group. So I'm suggesting just a quick 5-6 minutes where you could introduce yourself in a small group. And if you're interested and comfortable, share one thing that really stays with you after after listening to Dr. Watson. And then shifting that to where you are now, and consider what it is that you're bringing in terms of a question for this session, what you're hoping to get out of it, just one short thing. So, and if you have questions as you go, of course, put them in the chat. And I'd love at the end of this, if you have themes that seem to be emerging out of your quick little breakout, let me know in the chat, and I'll take those into consideration as I try to work us through this conversation together. So Gareth, go for it. Okay. Yeah, thanks. All right, welcome back. Oh, here comes one more group, I think. So I
That
imagine.
should be everybody back now.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. So I imagine that was nice to be able to speak to people after this is just not the conference that one would normally have. So I'm glad to give you that short time. If you have any themes or burning questions or whatnot, I'd love to see them in the chat, and I'll, as I said, try to incorporate them as we go. I do hope to have conversation where I can we can just speak a little bit too as we go. Okay. All right. Well, let me get into it a little bit. So I want to talk first about hope and inspiration. And you know, when you go reading around for pictures and then you see when you go, yeah, that's it. Look at this beautiful seedling just popping up out of, you know, zero conceivable good conditions. And I'm a pretty avid gardener these days, and sometimes it's a miracle to get it growing in the most, you know, beautiful organic composted soil. So this seems like a miracle and certainly a sign of hope. And hope is, I think, what we really need. And I know there's a parallel session going on right now with Ellen Kelsey, and we actually talked about trying to combine the two of us into one. And we were planning to do that. And then when we saw the numbers in each of our sessions, we decided to keep them separate. But I regret that they're at the same time, because I think you know, she could start and I could finish, and it would be a more fuller picture. Anyway, as it is, I do really think hope and inspiration is the way to go. So much of the narrative around our climate crisis is about the crisis part and about all the things that are wrong, all the things that are just so worrying. And I know you see it in the kids. Certainly, I've seen it in the kids, and we see it in each other. And so, what can we be doing to be providing people real hope and creating plans that that give people confidence and help people step forward? So I'm going to give you a couple of things that I've been involved with, that some of which are outside of the school sector, but that have really given me hope. And the first is this question: what does good look like? So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the International Living Future Institute. On the West Coast, there is so much more happening with them than here in the eastern half of the country. But the International Living Future Institute was actually founded by a Canadian about 15 years ago. And he's an architect and a designer. He's now living on the West Coast in the US. But I've come to know him, and he's a consultant on a building project that I'm involved with. And he was frustrated with the building standards, you know, whether it was LEED or some of these others, where it was just about being less bad, less toxic, less energy use. You know, but it was never about, well, what would it look like if actually we were making choices and designing things that were good, or heck, great for our world, for ourselves, for each other. So he actually created a whole design standard called the Living Building Challenge, and there's now a whole suite of standards, and they are all born out of this question: what does good look like? And I actually think, and so I'll just show you a couple of things. So, and the mission of the International Living Future Institute, which is now, as I said, 15 years old, is to catalyze the transformation toward communities that are socially just, culturally rich, and ecologically restorative. So it's about thinking about how every choice we make can be a choice that makes the world a better place, essentially. And so how do we go about doing that? And so he created these challenges, and he's truly a visionary and yet a super down to earth guy. And he used the metaphor of a forest and also of a flower, but the same idea that what if a building or a community was rooted in place, is rooted in place, and was adaptive to the climate and the site, harvests all its energy and water the way a forest does or the way a flower does. All waste is a resource. There's such diversity and beauty. There's such interrelationships between the various living beings in a forest. They're beautiful. They are health giving. They smell great. They literally, there is science to show that it makes you healthier to walk through a forest, and you on the West Coast know that better than most. So, so with that premise, what can we do in designing our buildings was his question, in designing our communities. How many of you, are any of you familiar with the Living Building Challenge or the Living Community Challenge? Give me a thumbs up or a sign in the chat, anybody? No. There are a couple of case schools that I'm aware of that are, one is, I actually don't think I can sort of share it yet, but I'm hope that they are working with architects in this, going down this path. So I really hope to see some of that. One of the things about these challenges that is really so inspiring is that their performance areas, I have them here, are the traditional ones: water, energy, materials, which are traditional building performance areas, but they also have a very important set of imperatives around place. And then they have health and happiness and equity and beauty, all as part of their picture of what good looks like, which makes perfect sense when you think about it. And it's just such a more holistic perspective to take. So I bring this to you. This is just a terribly light dusting in this, in what the ILFI is doing, but I bring it to you as just another perspective on how to create a really hopeful, inspiring plan. I mean, I get excited just thinking about some of what they encourage us to do in the buildings. And I'm involved. So I'm involved with a Living Community Challenge and Living Building Challenge project here in Eastern Ontario. And it's so exciting, and it's our hope to make this a demonstration project that we will be able to really show folks some of these strategies. So that's one thing. Another thing, another area of information, I guess, and I just have the link here, and I will share a set of resources later in the chat. But Project Drawdown, how many of you are aware of Project Drawdown? We're following it. Anybody? So it was a book written actually about 4 years ago now, I think 4 or 5 years ago now. And it was at the time a summary of the 80 best solutions that are already technologically proven around the world, that if we scale them up to a certain amount, could actually reverse the effects of global warming. And the word drawdown comes from the idea that you're starting to draw down carbon rather than carbon emissions going up. And so Project Drawdown was formed, and this book was published as a set of scientific studies. And then in the ensuing years, they have actually updated their information, and there's a free PDF book of a new set of the solutions that have been updated, and it's on the website that they've got. You'd find it drawdown.org. It's called the Drawdown Review. And again, it's things we already know how to do, and it's things you might think of, and it's like, converting to electric vehicles or, renewable energy and those things, but it's also things like empowering women and girls around the world. And they actually have done the math. They can show you what it would be to, what the effect on carbon emissions, if you can believe it, would be if women and girls were empowered and educated and supported around the world. That's just one that stands out for me among so many. And as educators, they have a relationship with. They're starting to bring more educational programs online, and I'm curious to see what else they do bring. They have something called the Project Drawdown Eco Challenge, which is a very interactive 21-day challenge that you can enter a team in, and it's fun, and it gives you practical solutions in the various categories that they've come to know. And I've done this with a green team before. It was an elementary, middle school green team. And we had some fun just picking some projects and setting some goals. And the other thing is that they have sets of articles. It's meant for people studying journalism, or high school kids that would work in high school too, I think, where they have sample stories in these different categories, and there's tools for you to be able to use and to create discussions, whether it's in your sciences classes or in your social sciences or in English or used across the board. So I invite you to look at Project Drawdown. Again, it's about hope and I have the word confidence in there. When you read these, you go, yeah, it's possible. We can do this. And then something else, there's a documentary film called 2040. Anybody seen 2040? It came out, unfortunately, in Canada. It was released last June in the middle of the pandemic at the end of the school year. I think it got buried, but it is about an hour and a half long. And it's a film out of Australia. And it's a really delightful look at what the year 2040 could be like through the eyes of a parent of a daughter. And his daughter is, 4 years old right now, and then looking at her ahead 20 years. And they go back and forth. And so they talk about it as a fact-based dreaming documentary. And it's meant to be used with families and in school settings. There are some things I would say are I think too harsh for our youngest audiences, but overall it's a great film to provoke conversation. And they have a website called What's Your 2040, and they have teacher resources. They're in English, they're Australian for the Australian school system, but it probably wouldn't be that hard to adopt them. And this was a film that I was interested in using as a Canada-wide campaign with the Case Green Schools project at the time, and maybe we'll get back to that. But I encourage you to watch it and look at it. It's very, again, inspiring, and they use the solutions that are talked about in Drawdown in this film. So that's a couple of things that I see as helpful resources when you're setting a hopeful and inspirational plan. Now I want to just talk to a teeny little bit, and I could go on for a long time on this one, but the practical and high impact, and what do I see? I think of the honeybee as being incredibly practical and high impact. So the first thing I'll point you to is a resource that the US Green Building Council worked on with the Center for Green Schools in the US. And it is a framework at a high level that, and so there's a free PDF that you can find when you Google this. And I'll give you the resources. Anyway, they look at the whole school, and they give you some ways of framing a sustainability plan in the context of whole school sustainability. We often see that it's teachers that take it up with the student group, or perhaps it's somebody in facilities that starts working on waste, but where you can get the real high impact and the real, really the opportunity for change. It's when you're looking at it as a whole school, and organizational culture is such a huge part of that, as I'm sure you know. And I have a background, actually, I should say I'm not an educator. My educational track was in adult education and organizational change. And I will say that culture change is huge, and it has way more impact than probably most other things you can do. So that's in terms of high impact, and it's the whole school that I think we need to take on. And I think schools like yours can really do that. The other thing I would just say about whole school is that we set meaningful goals that really feel like they are goals that will get us down the path we need to get down. So in the Case Green Schools project, we were talking about the idea, imagining the day where every Case school was carbon negative, that was a goal, that we were actually drawing down more carbon than we were emitting. And we defined it as each Case school community, and thinking as broadly as we could about what would a community be, a Case school or an ISABC school, how do you define community? So to have that as a lofty aspirational goal, signals to folks that you've read the IPCC, you know what the targets are globally, and what can we do. And then, of course, engaging with students, and then this idea of measuring and celebrating progress. One of the things that I did when I was working on the Case project was we researched who was out there measuring greenhouse gas emission calculators for schools, because I actually think that's really something. It's starting to happen in municipalities all over, but figuring it out for schools it's a different challenge. And there is an organization now that's working on it, and it's called the Green Schools Alliance, and I would encourage you to check them out. They have a tool called START, and it's a comprehensive measurement tool, but they are working with partners to factor in greenhouse gas tracking as part of that. And I think that's for sure that's coming. And to the degree that you all can lead and get on that path, I think it will be really, really motivational, really, for everybody. Hawaii Prep, and I'm going to see if this link will let me go there. I'm just going to go to their website. So Hawaii Preparatory Academy is one example that I like to point to of a school that's really taken, they actually use the Green Schools framework that I shared in an earlier slide, and they have created a really comprehensive sustainability plan. And I want to actually show you their goals and metrics here. So they have a dashboard. I suspect they have paused during COVID from what I'm looking at, but they created a dashboard with measures across a whole bunch of areas. Here are their areas. And they're actually behind each of these is a sort of a crowdsourced spreadsheet and different data collection methods. But they've really gone in an incredibly comprehensive way in both setting goals and tracking with measurable progress. And of course, anybody can look and see what they're doing. So, you know, it takes some effort to get to it, to create a plan like this and start to track it. But I give them incredibly high marks. And throughout the couple of years that I was working on this project, I was looking for examples like this, and there aren't that many yet out there. Maybe I'll stop for just a moment and see what questions or comments or reactions you have to any of that first bit that I just shared with you. You can put in the chat, or you could just open your mic and say something.
Hi, it's Laura talking.
Oh, Laura.
Hi. So I'm teaching environmental science 12 this year for the first time, and I'm really looking for something like this to do with my class to kind of culminate their climate change topic. So I found there's a resource on the UBC website. They have this like climate change, I think it's called the Cool Kit package. But it's like a visioning exercise of looking at your school campus and figuring out like, you know, what are your big fossil fuel kind of uses on campus, and then how could you, like, it's a visioning exercise to try to figure out what the school could do better in the future. But I just find myself feeling like really overwhelmed by the task because I don't know the answers. I don't know our campus intimately enough to know kind of where everything is. But anyways, I'm hoping to scaffold a project like this for them. I don't know if you have any advice.
Great. Well, I mean, yeah, we could, I can think of a lot of things. You know, Project Drawdown might be a bit of learning that would go into it. The movie 2040, actually, they asked the question, what's your 2040? And their intent, and I think in some countries this was successful before the pandemic, to get people thinking about that very same idea of visioning. What's your 2040 look like? So you may watch the film with them. That might be something to provoke ideas. They show really cool, you know, they show a little village in a developing country that's created a microgrid of solar panels to actually sort of leapfrog from having no electricity straight to renewable energy and not having to go through the whole fossil fuel phase, for example. So it's just fun, and it sparks imagination. I think that could be of use. And if you want, I can you can always email me if you want something more specific, and I can see what there might be. Any other comments or questions or thoughts? I'm not chat here, hang on.
People are noticing, Michèle are commenting in the chat about how nice it is to have those metrics and those targets and clearly measurable, not only for internal purposes, but also as a way to build excitement around sustainability across various stakeholders.
I totally agree. I think this is actually essential to a high impact plan, is the targets and measures and the communication of those and the celebration of those. So And I think, again, independent schools, I'm so excited about the role independent schools can play, and I will say more about this as we go on, but I think that independent schools can absolutely pioneer this for the education sector. And will need to, in fact, every sector is going to need pioneers to really get us to net zero by 2050. And so, yeah, I'll say more about this, but that's really my passion, is just to catalyze some folks to really take this on. Okay, something else I just want to point to and acknowledge that could be a whole topic unto itself, is that the definition of sort of sustainability is evolving and stretching, and the idea of regeneration is one. So both the International Living Future Institute's definition of regeneration and this idea of just making the world a better place is really at what I would call one of the parts of the leading definition of sustainability these days. And the word sustainability gets tossed around, and sometimes we debate it because it sounds a bit too modest a goal almost, when really it is about healing and regeneration of the planet that we need to take on. And in that, one of the other things that you hear about now, as we are starting to come out the other side of this pandemic, we hope, is the idea of a just recovery. And that defining sustainability in the future, thinking about that as broadly as thinking about all the people, all the intersecting crises that we have right now, and the fact that we really must define a plan for the future that heals ourselves as humans and heals the earth as well. And so I don't know if you've come across, oops, sorry, come here, come across this, but this was I think 350.org started this, but anyway, a group of environmental organizations and other nonprofits started to promote principles of a just recovery. And you can look this up online as well, and I have a link to it that I'll share. But I'll read them too, because it's hard to read. Put people's health and well-being first, no exceptions. Strengthen the social safety net and provide relief directly to people. Prioritize needs of workers and communities. Build resilience to prevent future crises. Build solidarity and equity across communities, generations, and borders. And uphold Indigenous rights and work in partnership with Indigenous peoples. So environmental groups that are calling for sustainable targets and setting us on this path toward a sustainable future have all said, and we, by the way, need to do it this way, that we must take these principles into our planning and ensure that that's part of a holistic plan. And I would encourage you, I know you're all working hard on diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, pluralism strategies and plans, and taking that really to heart in your schools. And I would encourage you to learn more about, if you haven't already, about the intersection between some of these issues. And one of the other things about the definition of the climate crisis in 2021 and the definition of sustainability is really this intersectionality, and the need to recognize that the people who are already vulnerable from all these other reasons, all the social ills around us, are incredibly impacted by the climate crisis consequences that we face. And we need to help them in so many ways and address the climate crisis through their needs as well. So I would encourage you to consider that as part of a high impact plan. I have a survey here of student voices, and I won't share it, but I was thinking, how do we do this? What I'd love for you to do is to just reflect on what your students are asking of you, and maybe put it in the chat. What are the students saying that you're working with? And so maybe one of the things that I will tell you about the student work that I was doing in the CASE project is that we had a bunch of green teams, and we had a bunch of dialogue started with different students at schools across the country, both in elementary and in the secondary level. And I did a survey where I actually shared a bit of a hopeful, imaginative picture of what it might be like, say in 20 years, where the birds are back and the water is clean and the air is clean and there's no asthma anymore and there's no poverty. And I just sort of painted this little picture, and then I said, what do you think of this? And I let them, and they're like, wow, could this be possible? I would love this. And just to give students a different picture to think about, just gets them in a whole other space to then I asked other questions about what they thought needed to happen and what their schools could do. It wasn't a comprehensive survey across the country. I was reaching out to kids that we were in touch with, but it was still so poignant. And I know you're experiencing that in your own schools, but what was really powerful was to help them see a different picture and a different imagination of what it could be. I'm just reading some of these comments, and I agree with Dean, and there is a school out west last year whose students presented to their board their request for some sustainability efforts. It was just happening as the pandemic started. I don't remember what school it was. I knew it at the time. If you are at that school, let us know. But yeah, it was such a powerful. Was that you, Gareth? Did you just wave? No. Such a powerful experience to have teenagers speak to the board and propose what they might do. And this, I think what this was they were, instead of doing one of the school strikes, they said, we're going to work on a presentation. So they used that time that they might have left on a Friday to go strike, and they prepared a presentation and they presented it to their board. And I didn't get to hear how it went, but I'm sure it had an impact. Yeah, Nicole, I know that students do feel a lack of hope, and that's really what I think we need to work on, is finding ways to empower them and to also model it. One of the themes in the survey was that the students provided to us was to talk about how they weren't seeing it in their schools in a consistent way, and they see it when we're not living what we're talking about. Even when we have sustainability plans, they don't always buy what you're selling unless it's right. You're demonstrating it. Okay, so let me just keep going. And you've heard me say this a little bit already. I really feel like independent schools have a privilege and an opportunity and a responsibility to get there before the rest of this education sector, basically. To get to 2050 at net zero doesn't mean, some people need to get there by 2030 to show the way for the rest. And so really, I think it's for all of you, all of us, to figure out how independent schools who have, the privilege of independence is that you're not stuck in this crazy inertia of a bureaucratic board and whatnot. You can create things, you can do things, and you can engage all aspects of your campus and your constituents. And I think the opportunity is also that, if you do the math, and I like to think about this, how many kitchen table conversations does your school influence? And what I mean by that, right? Like, how many families are enrolled in your schools? How many faculty and staff are part of your community? How many alumni are you in touch with? How the services that come, your food services if they're outsourced, or all those people. Think about that broad community. Think about all those kitchen tables. What they say, that one of the most powerful climate communicators out there is the earnest 13-year-old young person talking to their 46-year-old father about what they believe, what they need, what they're worried about. So think about that in terms of the kitchen tables that you influence and the possibility to have an impact. And so that's another way that I think of high impact, is that you all have such potential to have an impact. And then the other thing that I think about, which is just real in independent schools, is that who are those people at the breakfast table in those kitchens around your community? And what influence do they have in workplaces, in government, in corporations, in higher ed, wherever they are? There's just so much ripple effect potential for what you do in your schools. And so your ability to lead is just, I think, tremendous. And how exciting to think about creating a measurable high impact plan that you can communicate to all those folks and get them excited to just start to make changes in their own spheres of influence. So that's some of my passion that you see showing up out here. So I guess I want to give you another chance to chat in smaller groups about some of what I've sort of danced through, and this has been super fast, I know. And my question that I suggest you take into a breakout group is, what's the opportunity for impact if you all were to collaborate in some way around BC, around your Independent School Association, or more broadly? But that was actually a question that Elizabeth Moore asked me to pose to you all, because it's something that she's interested in hearing more about as well. So maybe take a few minutes. How's our time? Yeah, take maybe 5 or 6 minutes. Let's see how it goes, and just start a conversation about this question.
Should be everyone now, Michèle.
Okay, great. Welcome back. Well, that was, I would love to hear what you, any comments or questions you have, either questions about what I shared, or your conversation just now about what you could collaborate on together.
In my group, Katarina came up with an absolutely brilliant idea to actually hopefully connect all the schools in the ISABC and actually create a sustainability team that we could share ideas, recommend resources and strategies to actually move this forward. There'd be the element of accountability, but just the idea of actually trying to do this as a group, showing that as a collective, we can move forward with less stress, with kind of, and as well as quicker, and then pose that model hopefully out into the public schools or whatnot. But great idea.
Great. Now, a few of you are on a committee with ISABC related to sustainability. What's the mandate of that committee?
I believe there's a collaborative group through the ISABC that different folks sit on or are involved in. I know our sustainability coordinator is involved in that working group collab, but I'm not. I don't know if anybody else is on this call.
Maybe there's name in the call, but that's how it was. Somebody from one of your schools that was in a course I taught, and she's on that committee, and that's how I ended up here. So it exists. So maybe it's even maybe a little further along than you might think, and you could use that already set up.
Do you know, Michèle, if that collaborative group has every school represented, or is it
I don't
on
know.
its own thing? Okay.
I don't know. Other nuggets coming out of your conversation? Oh, somebody asked the name of the group. I don't know. I think you could probably just ask the ISABC office. Yeah, Dean's saying Jane will know the answer to this.
I was going to say, Dan and I were talking about how it would be nice to kind of to collaborate with another school in order to create kind of a school challenge, and then you have a metric to compare yourself against. So I'm at Sean again. So Brentwood is just down the road from us, and they're very similar boarding school environments. So it'd be really neat to look at, kind of creating like a carbon neutral goal and where we're both at this point. And just like different ideas to kind of help boost motivation, I guess, to do better and to do more.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, of course, there are ways where you all are, in some ways competitors, but hopefully in this regard, we just know we all have to work together, and the students are dying to do this kind of thing. One of my favorite stories of Trinity College School in Port Hope, Ontario has won the Green Schools Award nationally, and is just an incredible beacon of a model of how to do things, in my opinion as well. Check them out. But one of my favorite things was a student group that talked about having a competition between their houses, which is a common thing to do. And one of my favorite things was they started a heat-free hair day. Like, I would never have thought of that, but they like one of the ways they're calculating, you know, their impact is like nobody gets to curl or blow dry or whatever, straighten their hair on Thursdays. And that was it. And they invited other people. So even fun competitions like that, it really puts it in the kids' minds. It puts it in their frame of reference. It's, you know, just little things like that can really get the ball rolling. Well, I think we just have a few minutes left. I'll read the.
Can I jump in for a sec?
That would be great.
So, I was just going to say, someone mentioned, you know, getting the students to ask really meaningful inquiry questions and investigate. And just an example, I had a great conversation with a student and led to, you know, talks about how we could be a little bit more environmentally conscious as a school. And he said, well, like, where would I talk to someone about the waste that is being, you know, produced on campus? And just that question led him, you know, into all sorts of directions, but it also connects your school, right? So that now people that are doing jobs that you might not have ever looked at as a student, you're seeing, well, that's like a really important piece to this community. So like a great investigation that led to a connection. And yeah, that's all.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think the idea of this cross-functional bit, right, where you have operations and program and kids and admin all in one conversation and making a plan together, that's going to really make a difference. Now, just maybe I'll leave you with one thought, which is that in the K-Screen Schools project, just before we paused, we were developing new accreditation standards, the new input into the accreditation process for CASE to reflect sustainability more thoroughly throughout. So that project got paused, but then it's back in, and we did another pass at looking at what might be coming in just before the December break. And so I hope that I think you're probably all or mostly all in CASE. And if you're not, these will be public for you to see as well. But just to say that I think it's so important that it actually is something that we as independent schools start to hold ourselves accountable to as well, and set goals and standards for each other and help each other to achieve them. So, you know, the momentum will be building, and there'll be more and more coming as we get out of this pandemic. And I will say that I think that the Biden administration in the United States is going to you know, shame the Liberal government or whoever's in government around here to move along as well. So I think we'll see a lot more happening soon, and hopefully you all can lead in your own ways. So I put in the chat a list of a website that is part of an organization that I recently founded, because I just can't be held down on this. So I've created a list of resources that I've shared today on that webpage for you. And you can reach out to me. I'm happy to just provide some thoughts or on something specific if you're interested at any point. It's definitely a passion of mine, as you can probably tell. And I'm happy to connect people or point people in directions that may be useful to you. Any last, we're at 1:43 where I am. We're at almost a quarter to the hour. Any last comments or thoughts? I'll put my email in there again. Here's my email. That's my email. Feel free to just reach out. I'd be happy to chat. All right, well, I'll let you get on. I'm actually going to join a follow-up session in this third round that is related to some of these topics. So I may see some of you there, but have a lovely rest of your morning, and great to connect with you this way. Take care.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Thank you. That was lovely.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.